Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything that's happening with PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. I'm Damon Hadfield. As always, I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hey, hey.
Hello there. And this week we're joined by publisher of IGN, John Davison. John, welcome to the show.
Hello. How you doing?
And this week we'll be taking a look at what's going on, the latest with Microsoft's attempts to acquire Activision Blizzard. But our big topic this week is E3 and the increasing likelihood that this year will not see the triumphant return of the show, maybe not a return at all. So there's not been an E3 proper since 2019. 2020, it took the year off. Understandably so, that was the first year of the pandemic. In 2021, it returned as a digital-only event where I think only Xbox of the big three participated that year. And then again in 2022, no E3 at all. Supposedly, it was going to return this year with the help of ReedPop, the producer of PAX and Star Wars Celebration and New York Comic Con, a company that has a lot of experience putting on successful video game events. But 2 months away, no publisher is confirmed to be attending the show. IGN reported a few months ago that the big three, Xbox, PlayStation, Nintendo, would be passing. Ubisoft confirmed this week it would not be attending, even though it previously confirmed that it was. Now we've got Tencent, Sega not attending, and IGN has heard that at least a couple other big publishers have already decided that they're not going to be attending the show this year. So with just 2 months to go, it just doesn't seem like there's going to be much of a show happening at all. And in truth, this very show tapes a couple days before it airs, so who knows? Maybe by the time you're watching this, E3 will officially be canceled. What occurs to me, though, is that this entire console generation, PS5 and Xbox Series X, is thriving, basically, without E3. E3 has not really existed in any shape or form since these console launches, but they're doing just fine. So, John, let's get your take on this. You've covered many E3s in your time. The reasons why publishers are no longer so hot to participate in E3 are myriad. We don't probably need to get into all that, but do you think it's over? Is it over, and do the consoles not need it anymore?
Is E3 over? Well, maybe. I think what gets jumbled up is there's E3, the event, and then E3 as the anchor of a moment in time that we've been programmed over a couple of decades to expect game announcements around June, July. And I mean, that's still happening. Even though there may not be a thing called E3 that we all pile into, there's still this kind of like moment it's happening, and there's a lot of stuff happening in LA where there's going to be games announced. You know, there's Microsoft, there's Square Enix, there's a whole bunch of stuff starting on June 8th, running for about a week, which is happening anyway. And I think that's the problem. E3 used to be where everyone came together, and I don't think it's any coincidence that as we've seen a decline in things like E3, we've also seen a decline in particularly the platform holders, their kind of competency at communicating what it is that they're doing, right? They've all decided they're media companies now, so they all do a big showcase, and it seems like they're throwing all of their efforts to communicate about what they're doing into those showcases. Like Microsoft has this big one, there's actually 2 things back to back that they're doing. But their messaging is, hey, Game Pass is really important. It's really, you should all have Game Pass. Do any of you know what the last game released on Game Pass was? Also, there's one tomorrow. You get a bonus point if you know what's coming out tomorrow on Game Pass.
There's always new stuff coming out. I don't know what's coming out tomorrow, though.
Okay, so yesterday it was MLB The Show. Tomorrow it's Infinite Guitars. Has Microsoft bothered to tell anyone this? No, because they've kind of moved away from this idea of like communicating what they're doing on a constant basis. And instead, it's all like, come watch our showcase, you know, in June. And I think that's something that's really been lost out. And like, you know, Sony aren't great at it either. Nintendo will, they do direct. They wheel out a guy that looks like he's got a broomstick propped up his back, regardless of what it is that he's doing. And then they show some fantastic footage, but then they don't tell you what's going on. And I think the decline of E3 is directly correlated to game companies getting worse and worse at marketing and communicating what's important, which is everyone that loves their stuff, we don't know what PlayStation's doing between now and the end of the year. We don't know what's coming out on Game Pass. Look at Redfall. It's like a really exciting game, presumably. Not that Microsoft's bothered to really tell anyone anything about it between, there's been, 2 trailers? So I think there is an argument that E3 is a great, rallying point for everyone. And if it goes away,
that's bad for everything. I'm done ranting now.
That's a wow. That's a
good.
lot there.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Let's just talk about like how we learn about games, how that sort of messaging is put out there. Back when E3 was founded, that was magazines. That was physical paper magazines. And people would go to E3, preview a bunch of games, and then you'd hear about those games in like the August issue of GamePro or whatever. That stuff would trickle out, gradually. And now you can stream 4K gameplay. You can drop like a chunk of what the game looks like in action, and you can go directly to the consumer. And admittedly, Xbox and Sony and Nintendo, they all have varying degrees of success at actually getting that messaging out there. But I think Nintendo kind of cracked the code with Nintendo Directs, where it's understanding that trying to compete with all the noise that's coming out around E3, it's just a shouting match, and it's fun. It's like video game Super Bowl Christmas. It's great to get very excited about it as a fan, as a consumer, as a member of the press. It's cool that it's this tentpole event. But at the same time, if you're trying to actually just get out news about your game, I mean, look at the Tears of the Kingdom thing that just dropped. It was at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday, and there was no competition. Everyone was talking about that because that's what they put out at that time, and they were able to kind of plan ahead. If you look at, I don't know, Rockstar, like they don't really mess with E3. They haven't for a very long time. They will say, hey, we got something to show you in a week, and they put up like a JPEG, and everyone loses their mind, and everybody else clears out of the way because Rockstar is going to say something. And I don't know, I don't think you need E3 for that. I think the ESA charging millions and millions of dollars for booth space is it's kind of a racket, and I think people kind of got hip to it. And then conversely, as a fan event, you have to do more than just saying it's a fan event. You have to. I think ReedPop theoretically understands that, but what E3 is kind of fundamentally, it's not a if you build it they will come kind of scenario. Like you look at Star Wars Celebration, that kind of began as a fan event and gradually kind of snowballed into becoming an officially endorsed like Lucasfilm Star Wars convention. I mean, PAX began as an expo based on a webcomic. Like it's a different animal. E3, the charm of it as a fan was like it is a golden ticket to the chocolate factory. You get to be inside the industry, you get up close and personal, you get to see secret stuff that no one else got to see. And I mean, I feel like if you just started selling tickets to the chocolate factory, the Oompa Loompas would get kind of mad and they'd go hide. That's kind of how it is.
So I don't disagree, but I think what we're in right now is we don't have either, right? So we don't have Rockstar are very good, but they only release a game every 10 years. Everyone else is sort of like still partly behaving like there is a big moment in June and partly behaving like they're going to dribble stuff out during the year. So what we end up is as gamers and fans of these, I mean, the question was specifically about the platforms, but I think it applies to everyone, is we don't know as much as we used to. I mean, games are taking long to come out, but it also means that the smaller stuff gets buried as well. So, if Microsoft's message is Game Pass and there's 100 games and, the majority of them are indies or whatever, they're also not telling people what they're doing consistently. So we're in this kind of like no man's land between having a big event and having not. I like the idea of like having a moment in time where everyone can celebrate games. I agree that the event itself is antiquated. I mean, its original job, the us going and talking about games was secondary. It was buyers from GameStop and Babbage's and stuff going to decide how many copies they were going to buy to put on shelves. And that sort of disappeared quickly. And, Microsoft came along later. I think PlayStation were doing these big kind of showy, glitzy events. I mean, the Microsoft and Sony press conferences back then, Sega did a big thing as well. They were exciting moments, and then everyone would rally around it. And I think there's an element of that. But what we're seeing in particular this year is now everyone's trying to decide, well, what are we going to do instead? Or what? And everyone now wants their own little piece of it. Like Square Enix are doing a press conference for Final Fantasy, and there are people that are trying to support the indie community by bringing stuff together there. Now, we have an advantage as IGN in that we can just look, we're just going to cover all of it. The fact that it's happening in the space of 10 days is actually super convenient for us. But as a fan looking at what's coming next, I've just, right now, you can actually walk into a store and buy a PS5 and an Xbox Series X fairly easily. But you don't really know what's coming out at the end of this year for it. Outside of Spider-Man 2, what do you know on PlayStation that's coming out?
Okay, John, what do you think's happened with ReedPop? Because on paper, they seem like the perfect choice to take over E3. I've just heard about the ESA and behind the scenes, they can be sort of disorganized and hard to communicate with. So it would kind of seem like ReedPop, who has all this experience putting on PAX, seems like they would be like the professionals coming in to take over, and they're taking over an established brand with millions of gamers looking forward to this show every single year. What do you think happened?
No, I mean, I think that they've had a really tough time. You know, we've been talking to them since the beginning. I think everyone's been talking to them, and a lot of it is about, you know, is it a business event? Is it a fan event? Are the game studios ready to show something or not? You know, like we're coming off 3 years of the cycle that developers and studios and publishers work to, moving from this very regimented, okay, we have a beat in the middle of the year where we show stuff and we do trailers and big things at E3, and then, you know, if it's coming out, stuff always used to come out, you know, in November. Like, our November used to be hell. And like this year, as far as I can tell, it's not going to be. Like, but our Q1 is getting more and more packed as stuff is sort of slipping out, which means that these beats that happen earlier in the year when trailers and information and announcements happen, it's sort of moving. So ReedPop were, you know, they were sort of fighting the natural rhythm of the games business. And I think what we're finding is that a lot of people just haven't been ready, because for the last 3 years they've not needed to be, and they're working differently now, and it's really challenging, particularly if you want people to spend millions of dollars on a big booth and a big showy thing. And, you know, if you're inviting the public in, I mean, it's better if they can play it rather than sticking them in a theater and saying, hey, the trailer we released on YouTube, you can watch it on a big screen here. I don't need to pay whatever I can't remember what the ticket price is, $30 or whatever it is to get. I don't need to go sit in a room full of people to watch it. I'll just watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, I mean, conversely, there's Gamescom, which has always been a fan and industry event. Like, it's by design. It knows what it's trying to be. It knows what it's doing, and it's smart. They have 2 days of business time, and then 3 days of, you know, fans come in and have cosplay contests and play video games and have a great time, eat sausages, stuff like that. And it's weird that E3 never even. There was never an attempt to do that. Was there ever like 2 business days and then fan days, or was it?
No.
Yeah, exactly. It was this awkward transformation that kind of stumbled, and of course COVID didn't help. That was a big monkey wrench right there. But at the same time, also the time frame. Gamescom is in August. If everything's coming out 2 or 3 months later, that's pretty well suited for that.
So I mean, 300,000 people go to Gamescom. I mean, It's significantly bigger, but it's designed around being a fan celebration first. And it's, well, while there's a bunch of media attention on a bunch of people showing up to show this thing, let's show some games. Also, in Germany, lots of farming games that you don't see anywhere else. Lots of big trucks and stuff like that. So we also get some insight and a lot more of a spotlight on games that are outside of that kind of AAA mainstream norm. I think the other challenge, honestly, is the number of AAA games is considerably less than it used to be. I mean, it used to be every year there were a bunch of like big budget games coming out, and Rockstar was the anomaly. Now, like, you know, there's no, you know, we didn't get an Assassin's Creed last year. We're starting to see, other than Call of Duty, which we'll talk about in a minute, the notion of annualized games is sort of starting to fade into the background a little bit, which I think has also been a factor.
Why do an annualized game when you can just have a service that's slowly drip feeding content? But
All
then again, it's also
the biggest games in the world are all that, right? Fortnite and League of Legends and Minecraft and Roblox, they're all ongoing services. And I think, you know, you need a different way to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's bizarre to me that there's not more direct communication with the console platforms, because they have that. It's just your dashboard, you know, like there is a Game Pass app. You pop it up and it says coming soon. Here's what's coming out this week, which is great. And, you know, Sony occasionally does drop like, oh, here's a state of play. Here's 10 minutes of Demon's Souls. It's just on your dashboard right there. But it would be so nice if there was something a little more bespoke, a little more deliberate, a little more, hey, you there, PlayStation owner, you there, Xbox owner, I'm talking directly to you. And also, if you want to get rid of this, just click the X in the corner, whatever. Maybe it doesn't need to be pop-up, but you get the idea. Some kind of, you know, we're constantly tuned into everything. We're all on social media. We're all watching videos on the internet. We're all kind of keyed into this, and it's just kind of bizarre that we're seeing, you know, Nintendo carts out a strange direct every few months, and Microsoft does like a big, huge showcase followed by a slightly smaller, longer showcase in the middle of June for whatever reason. Occasionally they have something else to show off, and Sony surfaces once every 2.5 months with something. but it's so inconsistent and it's so kind of all over the place.
I think I think you're winning me over on that you don't need E3. But I think it's that's the root of the problem, right? Is that absent this kind of like, we're going to put everything in front of you now, as fans, we need something more that's then like, well, we're saving it all up for this thing in June. And then, I mean, there have been some disappointing PlayStation and Microsoft events in particular where, we have the Game Awards, which is an additional beat in December now, right? Which is where things are revealed. Microsoft didn't show anything at that. So I think there's a definite problem with how the platform holders are communicating with their audience. And I think there's some hubris in it, right? I mean, the PlayStation 5 is selling phenomenally well, and yet we're not being kind of spoken to like, here's why you need to be excited about that thing. You need to, if you don't have a PS5, you can go into a store and you can buy one now because the following games are coming. They're not doing that.
John, there's
that's
also
true.
John, without an E3, an in-person E3, there's also the loss of a journalistic benefit where we get to go in there and get hands-on time with all these games, or at the very least get behind closed doors, hands-off demos, where we can check out these games and then deliver our impressions to our audience in previews. When Sony just has a state of play, we don't get hands-on with any of those games. We don't get any sort of extra demos or anything.
Yeah,
so
and those trailer and gameplay demos that we get, videos, they're highly curated. They're showing you exactly what they want you to see. I think there's real value to, putting people in a room and putting a controller in their hands and like, I know that it's driven by fear somewhat of like, oh, it's not ready or this isn't there or like, but also it's losing an opportunity for genuine heartfelt enthusiasm on a game, Like I think about when we send, Mitch to go play Street Fighter or something and he comes back raving about how amazing Street Fighter 6 is. That's like really valuable and like the trailer looks great, but hearing that what it feels like when you got it in your hand delivers on the promise of the trailer, that's a really powerful thing.
Yeah, for sure. In any case, this year's E3 is supposedly 2 months away. The window for any sort of event to happen is becoming very, very narrow. But we will keep you informed here at IGN. Moving on to our second topic this week, here's the latest what's going on with Microsoft's attempt to acquire Activision Blizzard. Many countries have cleared it. Several countries have given their okay, thumbs up. The latest is Japan. The Japan Fair Trade Commission has approved the acquisition. Its review concluded that the deal was, quote, unlikely to result in substantially restraining competition. I think the only big ones left are the UK, the market authority over there. They've softened their stance on it. It seems like they're gonna give it the pass, and I think in April next month they're supposed to give their final verdict. And then I think the US is the last big one. After that, it has to clear the FTC, and in June the saga should finally come to an end. So, John, two things. Do you feel like this is becoming increasingly likely that the deal will go through? And do you think that's a good or bad thing?
I think it'll happen. I mean, the EU is another one that hasn't said yet, yay or nay. It's looking really likely that the whole EU is going to give it the thumbs up. I don't think there's any doubt that it's going to happen. I think the conversation around it is unusual though, because they're buying Activision Blizzard King, but all anyone talks about is Call of Duty. And I think one of the mistakes is that Call of Duty sells 30+ million copies every year, and they're not all on Xbox and PC, that's for sure. So like, I think the PlayStation concern is a little blown out of proportion. I think the other thing people forget is really what they, as well as Call of Duty, they want King, right? Microsoft does not have a big mobile gaming presence, and if they really want to become this like big entity, they need to be on every device. I think they're doing a good job with allowing you to stream to your phone and sort of approaching your phone or your tablet as this window into this library of games that they have. But in terms of games that they want to be able to own so that they can pull in the money, King is really valuable. I mean, the King games make billions of dollars every year. So I think that there's that seems to be forgotten a little bit. My concern with it is more that Microsoft sometimes feels like they're just collecting studios at the moment, and like we don't have a lot that we've seen from it. We were at the Epic thing during GDC last week, and Ninja Theory came out and showed Hellblade 2, which I think was announced in 2018. which was around the time Microsoft acquired them, and these long waits from when we hear about an acquisition to actually seeing something from it. I was looking it up. Actually, Ninja Theory did ship something under Microsoft. It was that Bleeding Edge thing that I don't think anyone played.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then there's a few others that you look at Undead Labs. We're still waiting on State of Decay 3. There's a lot of waiting, and we hear about all these acquisitions. I think the one advantage of them buying Call of Duty is there's one every year, and we will see one. But I don't know that it's. I think its anti-competitive argument is probably the wrong argument about it. Like, if Microsoft wants Call of Duty to still be this all-conquering thing, they needed to be able to play it on everything. And the number of people that buy that every year on PlayStation, I'm sure, is huge. I don't have the breakdown, but it's got to be massive.
Because Minecraft is still on everything.
Yeah,
they're still dropping Minecraft content everywhere.
Yeah,
it makes perfect sense if Call of Duty still prints money. People playing Warzone, season passes on there. Like, you'd want it to be in as many places as possible.
Yeah.
I mean, we've heard about Microsoft trying to put Game Pass on other consoles, which is kind of absurd to think about, but it can serve them if you're like they don't care if you're giving them $14 a month to play their games. I don't think they really care if you paid $500 for their console or the other guy's console. I mean, they're letting you stream it on your phone or do it on your PC or whatever. It's as for too long of a wait for games, I think that's just a symptom of games in general these days. They're bigger. They take longer to make. It's you have to make twice as many pixels as you did 2-3 years ago. They used to be smaller. The games, yeah.
And I think we're coming off this wave of there are these sort of I don't know, fashions, something. There are these waves of things that we go through, right? And we're just sort of coming off the back of everything has to be a game as a service game, which I think everyone has shaken out of their system a little bit now, where there's this assumption, we're going to make this game and you're going to spend all your time in it and you're going to play this and nothing else. And everyone had to have one. And these things cost, tens of millions of dollars to produce. And if they whiff, then the studio is kind of screwed, right? Because then they weren't working on something else in the background. I mean, even look at Halo had that problem, right? And it's it was going to be this thing that absorbed every piece of Halo culture, and it didn't deliver on that. So now it's kind of were they working on the next Halo, or was the bet always going to be that Halo Infinite was going to live up to its name and it was just going to live on for 10 years? So I think that's an element to it as well. But I think going back to the E3 thing or the big events, every year we wait for Microsoft to show something on, you acquired all these studios. What's the next big thing? And it can be a little worrying when we don't see that much stuff. But I think Blizzard is a strong brand. We just came off a huge 2 Diablo weekends.
Yeah.
I didn't get much sleep thanks to that. The nature of exclusivity, I think, is going to be the thing that keeps coming back. But what we're seeing more and more from Microsoft is that for some of these games, they're not interested in being exclusive. I mean, with the exception of things, we do know that Redfall is not going to be on PlayStation. Starfield's not going to be on PlayStation. But I think that stance will probably soften over time as it becomes more and more about this. We just want your money every month.
Yeah, it's true. There's just so many games that we've been waiting on from Xbox that were announced years ago, from Fable to Perfect Dark to Avowed to Indiana Jones from Machine Games. Hopefully we're on the cusp of actually getting those games with Redfall and Starfield hopefully coming out this year. Max, is it true? I'm getting a sense that you, as someone who hosts a weekly PlayStation podcast, you're not too concerned if this deal does go through?
I mean, I guess I'll believe it when I see it. If it becomes incredibly dire, it'll make it weird to host a PlayStation podcast. But at the same time, to the Minecraft point, I think Microsoft's about getting a bunch of stuff on there. I guess it's just sort of, we're still kind of seeing the dust settle on former purchases. Like we got, they bought Bethesda, and Xbox just got the hottest PS5 exclusive Ghostwire Tokyo. It's sort of, it's again, Starfield's going to change that. Redfall's going to change that. As it suddenly PlayStation's not getting these things, but it's hard to even comprehend it with stuff like Activision Blizzard. Call of Duty is such a massive game, and again, Phil Spencer, I can't talk today. Phil Spencer said that like he's not looking to just take Call of Duty away from PlayStation players. It seems like that, and they also announced they're going to be bringing Call of Duty to Switch, like to Nintendo something or other. So yeah, I mean, it seems like they're trying to play well with others, which is cool. But again, it's such a massive, huge, sort of all-encompassing acquisition that it's hard to comprehend it. You know, we've never seen anything of this scale.
No.
So like, I don't know what that looks like.
Yeah, that's actually why I hope it goes through personally, and I don't have any skin in this race. And like John, I want to know, is there any part of you that agrees with this? You've been covering the industry for a long time. It will just be such a huge tectonic shift in the industry. It's going to change the gaming industry forever. And when we look back and tell the story of video games, this is going to be like a hard chapter break in this novel. So just as someone who covers the industry, this is super interesting to me. And that's just kind of why I hope it all comes together. I don't know. Does any of that resonate with you, John?
Yeah, I think I'm going to sound really old now. I remember back in the old days, like just after magazines and into doing online stuff on like 1UP and stuff back then, we would talk on shows like this about how one day all games are going to be digital downloads, and people would write to us and tell us that we were crazy for saying that, and that we would be buying games in boxes forever. How could you possibly think? I'm never going to buy a digital only game. And meanwhile, Steam has whatever it is, 30 million people a day or whatever downloading games on it, and the PS5 I have doesn't have a disk drive. I think the shift that this is going to accelerate is that Game Pass thing. I think signing up for a service where you can play your library of games on as many devices as possible. That's the tectonic shift, and I think if Call of Duty is the thing that is really the big carrot for that, I gotta have Game Pass because I want to be able to play Call of Duty. I bought a new TV recently, and it has the Game Pass app built into it. So you just sign in with your Xbox Live account, you sync a Bluetooth controller to the TV, and if your internet connection is fast enough, you can play. Now, that's not something that everyone in every part of the US or every country has the ability to do. But as the infrastructure is getting better and better and people's internet connections, it works on a 5G connection on your phone. So, we're not far away from it being a practical consideration that I'm just going to be able to log in and play. And then whether it's sitting locally on the device that you're on or if it's streaming it from the cloud becomes irrelevant. And then it's really, you're paying for it. Then it's Netflix, right? Then I'm just paying for a library of stuff. And I think that's the tectonic shift. And if Call of Duty is on that service, which I can't remember, didn't they say that it wasn't going to be at first? There's been some talk of whether or not Call of Duty is going to be on Game Pass or not.
I don't think they've confirmed that.
Right, but I think if it is, then it's like, well, God, of course I'm going to have it,
Yeah, for sure. Well, in any case, this deal we've been talking about for well over a year now is expected to be completed in June, right around E3 time, or at least right around all the E3 adjacent events should be happening. So June should be a very exciting month. We've got the results from last episode's poll. We were talking about all those Unreal Engine 5 demos and upcoming Unreal Engine 5 games. We asked you, which Unreal Engine 5 game are you most excited about? Perhaps not surprisingly, it's Hellblade 2, just because that's been very closely associated with Unreal Engine 5 this whole time. That's followed by Stalker 2, and then Dragon Quest 12, which is a little surprising to me because I think that one is a little ways out there. A new poll for you to vote on for next week. If E3 is dead forever, how will you feel about it? Will you miss it? Are you indifferent? Or are you actually think it's better having all the publishers just sort of do their own thing on their own time? Make sure to vote at IGN.com. We'll share the results with you next week, and that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Max and John. Thank you to everyone working behind the scenes in our LA and San Francisco studios to make this all possible. My name is Damon. We'll be back next week with more PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X news. We'll see you then.